Hey there, how are you doing? If you are anything like I was when I first come across the material that I've just shared with you in this first M of MindMAP, the motive that kind of lies behind everything, the idea of freedom, you've probably been thrown into a bit of a spin. Okay, right. So when I was first making my transition from more of a personal trainer style coach to more of a coach style coach, I'd originally been very instructive in my approach. It was all blueprints. It was do this, right? First set, do this. Second set, do that. And it came down to detail as well, right? So in fact, I took pride on how my programs were built. You'd be doing this many sets of this many reps with this amount of pause in between on these days of the week. And when it came down to nutrition, very often it'd be, in the earlier stages at least, it was calories and all of that kind of stuff. And then it was macros. And then it was another diet completely, elimination diet with all its kind of fairly rigid rules and stuff. And I've got to tell you, I got incredible results with my clients, incredible. And I largely put those results down to the exactitude of the instruction that I would give people. So when I first discovered this idea about freedom, it threw me into a complete tailspin. And the reason is because I felt that basically the results I was getting with my clients were solely the kind of came as a result of the depth of the instruction that I was able to give. The idea that you've now got to stop doing all that just destroyed me temporarily, right? And then I realized it wasn't as complicated or as devastating as it might seem. Because really what it came down to was simply giving people more choice. And that's really what this session is saying, right? We're trying to get all scientific about it and bring in the neuroscience, right? But if we just want to talk in colloquial terms like friend to friend, buddy to buddy, go over a glass of wine or whatever, right? Really what I'd be saying is we've got to find a way for you to bring in more choice to the approaches that you're taking rather than relying solely and exclusively on instruction. And latterly, what I started to say to my clients was that, look, in the short term, I can do the A, B, C, D, do this, do that, don't do this, don't do that. And, certainly there's still a place for that. Like if someone's getting ready for a wedding in 6 weeks or a film part or any number of things that are maybe time sensitive, then I'm certainly not saying don't bring choice into it, but there's probably a lot more of an instructive approach available to you, right? As long as you're marrying that up with the explanation that what you're about to do to get these results is probably not going to last in the long term. So we're going to need a different approach once we get this event, if you want to call it, out of the way, right? But it's also being, so sorry, let me just come back to that for a second, because what that really is about honesty, because every choice comes with a consequence. Right? So the choice of harder, faster, more, blast, 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 blast is going to be very likely that, let me use the PT as an example again. My clients that got incredible results in 30, 60, 90 days, regardless of, whatever the type of program we were on, most of them, I would say 70 to 80%, didn't have those results 30, 60, 90 days after the program ended. Okay, they regressed. So I had all these wonderful pictures on my wall for a time of people that just did incredible things. And then you'd bump into them in the street like 30, 60, 90 days later, and they were often back to square one or often back even further back behind that, right? And when I'd speak to them about kind of the loss of the improvement that they'd make, they'd always answer pretty much the same thing, which was, it was great while I was doing it, but it was just too hard. There was no way I could fit that into my life permanently. There was no way I could take that approach consistently. There was no way that, not even just that I could, that I wanted to engage in that level of effort consistently all the time. And basically the amount of focus and effort and energy it took was okay for an event, but shit, it's not the way I want to live my life. Like I had to, weigh and measure everything I ate. My friends would go out at the weekends for a drink. I couldn't go with, they would tell me that basically it's okay for the short term, but not so cool for the long term, right? And so that was definitely, after seeing that for a few years and after really priding myself and in many respects hooking a lot of my identity into the fact that I got people these really quick and incredible results. I mean, I was in magazines and newspapers and TV shows and all kinds of stuff because of this, right? Like literally everywhere for a while. So my identity was tied up with these fast results. Imagine then what a kind of a knock to your identity that is to see the results backslide and to see people lose them all, or to see people to see yourself lose the clients, right? Because as I described in the training, your clients go from this there's this sense of you being an ally and an advocate for them to eventually you becoming an adversary, someone that they're trying to avoid, someone that they're trying to fight with or renegotiate with constantly, right? So this idea then that what we're trying to do is bring choice to our clients' lives is a vital one, because really what we're trying to do, for most of us at least, some of us may be in the realms of fairly quick fix. Now I know there are personal trainers who've joined the program who are still maybe concerned about does this mean now that like my clients are all going to get their results really, really slowly, and they're going to get they're not going to kind of be as impressed with the work that I'm doing with them? No, not necessarily. Not necessarily, because like I said, every choice comes with a consequence. So a big part of your role then is to help them find the choices available to them, and then explain to them the consequences. If you do this, you'll get the results faster, but you probably won't keep them. If you do this, the results will be slower. There's no doubt about it, but you will have them long term. What's most important to you at the moment, right? What's the consequences of each? If somebody really, really, really wants to look amazing on their wedding day, and the wedding day's a month away, they might say, you know what, for the pictures for my wedding day, and for all those people looking at me, it's worth it. I'll do anything. Okay. So I'm not, I would be going against the very idea of freedom if I was to say to you, you shouldn't do anything instruction based. The flip side of that is that big part of this is you ideally want to minimize the amount of explicit instruction that you give to your clients. And the way I describe it is to instruct less, extract more, ask more questions. You're a coach anyway, right? And this is what you do, and this is what you love doing. Ask more questions. What would you rather? Again, let me use PT, personal training, as an example. A lot of personal trainers have ideas of their favorite exercises and their favorite training systems and their favorite nutrition regimes and all the rest of it, right? But the truth is that while there might be better exercises for certain things, the real question is, what is the best? You as a trainer, as a coach, you probably get asked this very, very often, and I used to. What's the best exercise for losing fat? What's the best exercise for gaining muscle? What's the best repetition scheme? What's the best calorie matrix that I should put myself into? What's the best macros and all the rest of it? And people are often surprised at my answer, right? Because back in the day, I used to be so pernickety, so detailed, and I'd be very, very vocal on, oh, this exercise is better than that, and you should always do this, and you should never do that. Now my answer to what is the best approach to X, whatever X happens to be, is the one you'll stick to the longest. The one you'll stick to the longest, right? The best approach is always going to be the one you stick to the longest, because we're in this for the transformation and not just for the change, right? So instruction is very, very good at bringing about change, but extraction is far better at bringing about transformation because it involves the client. So my suggestion to you is that when you're whether it be you're an exercise coach and you're building exercises into their program, ask them what's your favorite leg exercise, right? Not I'm giving you squats or deadlifts because they're the best exercise, but what's your favorite leg exercise? Or what do you like about that, right? And maybe, I'm not saying not to give them squats if they don't like squats, but if they prefer something else, you go, okay, well, let's start you with the thing that you love. Because as a result of doing more of the thing that you love, you're going to be more consistent. If you're more consistent, you're going to get stronger in those muscles. And if you get stronger in those muscles, then maybe the exercise you used to hate and avoid, maybe you'll start to like it more because you've got stronger legs from doing, heaven forbid, leg extensions, right? Hopefully that makes sense, right? So this idea of helping people to be involved in their journey, that's one way of eliciting more freedom, of bringing about a greater sense of freedom for anybody, right? And what that also does is it gives you a greater sense of freedom because you get to stay in the advocate and ally place and you don't start getting boxed into the adversary place. Because that's a horrible place to be as a coach, right? You know you're bending over backwards and you're designing all the best stuff and your years of education and the money that you've spent and everything else, and suddenly you've got clients wanting to put up their fists and fight you over it. It's not a great place to be. It's not a great place to be as an individual. It's not a great place to be as a coach, and it's not a great place to be as a business operator as a coach, because you lose clients that way, right? But another aspect to this then is that trainers, coaches are often asking, well, but what if the client takes the piss? Right? What if I give them a whole bunch of choices, or we work out a whole bunch of choices, and all they ever do is choose the easiest ones, or the ones that are guaranteed to, have them get less of a result. And again, it comes back to consequences. You haven't really made a choice. And this is a really important part of this. And we're going to, obviously, when we get into this section or that section of the program, I'll talk to you about how we negotiate our way around this, right? But here's the short answer, is that you never really make a choice unless you understand the consequence of the choice. Like if you just go, well, what do you want, A or B? And you go A. That's not really a choice. That's more of a coin toss, right? It's kind of just random. If you say, I choose A because A will lead to this and it will allow me to do that, and I understand that as a result of that, my results might come slower, that was you making a choice. Okay, so I just want to kind of ram that home a little bit. Choices are only really valid, or let me say this in a different way. Choices have their greatest value when the choice is chosen in relation to a consequence. Okay, if they don't understand the consequence of the choice, then it wasn't really a choice. I've got something in my eye. I think it's dog's hair. I was rough and tumbling with my dog in the garden just before I came out to shoot this. So look, people tend not to take the piss if they're given an understanding of the consequences, right? So, and sometimes an understanding of the consequences with my clients used to be, look, you're paying me X £1,000s a year to help you with this, and you don't seem to be using it. The consequences are, we're going to get to the end of a year, you're going to be 50 grand out of pocket, and nothing is going to have changed in your life. Are you okay with that? Because if you're okay with it, then I'm okay. I'll keep working with you and helping you with other stuff. But the thing that you asked me for in the first place, we don't seem to be taking any action toward that. Are you okay with that? And of course, when you explain that to people, most people say, no, I'm not really. I want to get back on track, right? And that's not what most people call accountability. That's just helping people to understand consequence of choice. Okay, so let me just flip over my little card here for my next little tip for you. Look, largely a big part of this understanding of freedom is understanding the difference and the distinction between velocity and trajectory, right? So velocity is about how fast we go, and a lot of people in their coaching are really concerned about how quickly they can make the big breakthroughs, and they make making the big breakthroughs the focus and the aim of the coaching. Let me show you something really, really amazing right now, right? And I'm not averse to that. I'm certainly prone to that at times as well, right? I've got some cool little neurological tricks that will increase somebody's strength by 25 to 30%, that will increase someone's range of motion by 50% in seconds, right? And I love showing people that kind of stuff. But the reality is that the velocity that somebody makes progress in, or if you want to call it progress, the velocity someone moves at is no indication of the true progress they're making. Because trajectory, or in other words, we could put it another way, direction, is far more important. Look, if you and I stood on a racetrack to run 100 meters, and that direction is where the finish line is, but you're 10 times faster than me, right? Let's say you're Usain Bolt, and you stand on that start line with me, but you're facing that direction. It doesn't matter how fast you run. It doesn't matter what your velocity is, because your trajectory, the direction that you're heading in, the direction that you're moving toward, isn't the one where the goal is going to be achieved. Does that make sense? I hope it does, because one of the big doubts that comes with a lot of coaching in general, and also MindMAP coaching specifically, is that, damn, but if I do all this digging and extracting and exploring and guiding and all of this kind of stuff, that's so much slower than just saying, do this, do that, do this, do that. And my answer is yes, it might be. It's not a foregone conclusion that it is. But the answer is yes, it might actually be slower. But is it slower but moving in the direction? versus is the way you're trying to do things with the greater velocity, the greater speed, is that actually headed in the right direction, or is that headed in a direction where someone's going to run into a dead end, like a cul-de-sac, right? They're going to run into this dead end and they're going to go, I can't keep going any further, I need to back off for a while. Look into your heart, Luke. You know it to be true, right? I don't know if that's actually the true thing from Star Wars, but look into your heart. Look into your experience of coaching people. Look into your experience of yourself. Like, how have you done by spending more of your focus on velocity than trajectory, right? And how many dead ends have you run into? And how many times have you got to the point where you are expending so much time, effort, energy, and other resources and the return on investment is so small that you lose all heart and you end up stopping, quitting, or starting over again? How many times has that happened to you, right? And it's nearly always a result of working through a must, a should, a have to, a can't, a mustn't, a should never, right? In other words, a control, a restriction, or a limitation on your freedom. And whilst you may be at this point still a little bit dubious about just how impactful freedom can be, but I suggest you give it a go. I suggest you lean into this. And there's an exercise, there's an invitation after this lesson that kind of just asks you to look at areas of your life where you are maybe operating against the principle of freedom in your own life, and just identify them. See where other areas of freedom could come up for you, other choices. And remember, you only ever truly make a choice if you understand the consequence, right? And that consequence then leads us to, well, is that consequence worth it based upon what I'm actually going to have to do to get it? How short the duration of keeping it might be, right? Is it still worth it? So I hope this has made sense. I hope this has joined a few dots. The aim of these Date with DAX videos is to, take I'm hoping that what I'm teaching you in the main lessons is understandable and it's kind of hitting the spot. But I like these Date with DAX videos because they give me the opportunity to kind of speak to you about them in maybe more human terms rather than the instructor term. And kind of this was much more conversational, much more like a little bit of an extraction. So I know I'm not getting to speak with you, but hopefully this speaking to you in this format is useful. I don't know if you can see, first off, I'm just thinking about the continuity of these videos. Every day I come out here, I'm getting browner. It's June here. It is really, really hot and sunny. It's June here, it's June everywhere, right? But it's June, for those people who come later and watch these videos, it's June while I'm shooting them. I'm working in my garden most of the days while I'm writing up all of the MindMAP lessons and doing the various recordings. And so I've just slipped into this shirt, and first off, I'm getting pretty browny red. And secondly, I am dripping, I'm sweating like crazy. So I'm not sure how much of that's showing up in the video, but just know the suffering that I'm putting myself through in order to share this material with you. Listen, I hope you've enjoyed the lesson so far. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear from you in the comment section below about what you're learning so far, the dots that are getting joined, and any questions you've got, any confusion that's coming up, any things that kind of maybe aren't sitting right with you, or where maybe your experience runs different to what I'm saying, right? I want to be here to address all of this stuff. So this isn't just a version of coaching the world according to DAX, and this is it written in stone, and I'm not acknowledging that some of you are having different experiences. But when you are having different experiences, I'd love to be able to help you out with that and give you my 2 cents into why that might be the case, or some stuff that might be getting overlooked, or whatever, right? So do share in the comments, do reach out, do connect with me, and make sure that at the end of every lesson that you give yourself the time to consolidate that, right? Don't just rush into the next lesson just because it's there and it's waiting for you. Give yourself time to be with the lesson, and ideally, like I said at the start, listen to the lesson 2 to 3 times. I know, you might sit there and think, I got it. DAX, I've got it. I've got the concept, so I understand it. I don't need to listen to it 2 or 3 times. It's not about a need to listen to it in order to understand it. It's because every time you listen, you pick up something slightly different to what you learned previously. And I'll talk to you about this as we go into the learning phase. But let me just give you a kind of a little hint on how this works, right? So the first time you're exposed to a piece of information, it's like this. Imagine there's this straight line of attention. And as you hear me talk, I say something and your brain goes off on a little detour. It says, like, you're still hearing the words, but your brain goes, oh yeah, what he just said there, that's like when I was training Mary the other day. And yeah, that's exactly what happened with us. And sorry, the video screen just blacked out there. So you're going along, here's your attention, DAX says something, and you go, oh, right, yeah, that's just like when I was working with Mary. And then once you finish the thought about Mary, your attention comes back up to the baseline again, right? And then I say something else and your brain dips out and it comes back up to the baseline again. So by the time you get to the end of a lesson, you may have heard all of the things, but your thought trips that you went on create these little dips, these little gaps in the knowledge. Even though you've heard them, you haven't internalized them, you haven't connected the dots, you haven't neuro-associated, and that's really, really important. So what happens is the next time you listen, you go a bit further before you have your thoughts about Mary or the next client. You go, oh, right, yeah, that's a bit like this other client. This is like John. And then you come back up, right? And then by the time you come for it a third time, you've got further still. And so, you know, this is actually how the brain learns. It picks up on the most, it gives its attention to the most salient features, and it takes us off on these little thought trips, and these thought trips create little gaps in our knowledge. So you can be present with the learning material, but it doesn't mean that you're attending. In other words, it doesn't mean that you're giving your attention to all of what I'm saying equally, right? So just think about that as you're going through this program. My focus on getting you to go back for it 2 or 3 times isn't just purely for repetition, although there is value in the repetition itself, but it's to make sure that each time you study this material, you're filling in some of the gap where you've gone off on little thought trips. And I promise you, it will make you a much, much, much better practitioner of this material than if you just race through it in order to kind of put ticks in boxes and say, I've completed it. Okay? So hopefully that makes sense. I have spoken for a bit longer than I intended to. That was 22 minutes. So I'll let you get on with your day. But I hope you've enjoyed the lesson, and I'm looking forward to hearing your comments, your feedback, your questions, or anything that you want to say in the box below. Take care.